The Space God Memoirs. Season 2, Episode 8. I stood within the cramped elevator car, Zirathra beside me, a squirming mass of green vines blocking the only exit. The half-open door revealed a corridor completely clogged with the ancient plant weapon, which was rapidly creeping towards us. Zirathra raised a hand, and an invisible force pushed the Reachers back, the mass of them flopping into the corridor. Another flicker of her wrist, and the door closed fully. Zirathra sighed. The vines. The Veer bioweapon persists, even after all these cycles. They must have snaked their way inside and are blocking the shaft. She looked down for a moment, as if thinking. Take us to the educational level. She looked back in my direction. We'll have to find another way down to the core. There was a slight sense of movement as we ascended up a floor. Educational sector, said a thought that slipped in between my own. The elevator door in front of me opened, revealing a corridor that was thankfully free from vines. I stepped out from the elevator tube, Zirathra at my side. This hallway was constructed of similar soapstone walls as above, but lit by a subtle brassy light that clung to the ceiling and left just enough shade to give it some contrast. Here, the wall scripts of the topmost level had been replaced by intricate geometric patterns that appeared to shift and change as I glanced down the corridor, like illustrated equations solving themselves over time. Zirathra strode into the hall, giving the area a glance over. In these classrooms, the newly raised Naiar would have been taught our society, our philosophy and ways. Thousands of years ago, right? I said. Things had to have been a whole lot different back then. Zirathra shook her head. It is surprising how little changes over the ages. Worlds rise and fall. The balance of power shifts from faction to faction, from individual to individual. But the Naiar harmonium remains, and its foundation changes little. I nodded in acknowledgement, not knowing enough about any of that to have an opinion. This way, said Zirathra, pointing to the corridor on our right. I suspect that we can find our alternate path down somewhere through this hall, if the temple designs have not changed significantly. We began walking, and I noticed that my footsteps were still completely silent upon the floor. Weird. But this whole place was weird. Silence accompanied us as we continued our stroll down the dimly lit corridor, the lines and shapes on the walls subtly changing as we strolled by. Doorway after doorway appeared to either side of us. Some were closed, but others led off into rooms of varying designs. Most of them looked like classrooms, lined with benches and chairs, along with central pillars made of shiny metal and topped with clusters of glassy spheres. Others might have been meeting rooms, break rooms, or practice areas for various disciplines. A few times I thought I saw movement from within the shadowy side chambers, or heard a distant whisper from afar, too muddled to decipher. Occasionally there was a raspy, scratchy sound from somewhere beyond the walls. The vines? I would have stopped to check it out, but Zirathra seemed unperturbed, not even pausing. As we turned a corner, I noticed that the brassy light above had suddenly shifted to a blue-gray hue that made the hall look brighter. Ahead walked a line of people, clothed in simple white robes, distant but moving gradually towards me. I could hear them talking among one another, though it was too muddled to make out their words. I just stood there in the hall, a chill running down my spine. The group, 6 in total, got within a few feet of me. They were all people like myself, mostly Reuven-looking, all clean and healthy. One, a silver-haired young woman, smiled and waved at me. I was too stunned to wave back. The group of white-clad folk walked right past me and through the door of a classroom, disappearing inside. "What in the green ocean was that?" I asked, shaking my head. "Is this Scraggin place haunted?" Zirathra shook her head. "We are the only souls here. Those were simulations." "You mean like robots or something? What are they for?" "The final class of recruits here must have been a small one. They likely activated the simulated students to provide a sense of community, of population. The truly awake ones, like us, tend to be small in number. For some it gets lonely. That was the simulation's purpose. And no, they are not robots, but holograms." "Alrighty then," I said, rolling my eyes. "More Naiar weirdness." I wasn't even gonna ask what a hologram was, which would inevitably lead to a whole bunch of exposition I didn't have the patience to listen to. Onward we went, walking through more eerily lit hallways and side rooms where flickering images of instructors gave age-old lectures to nobody. Everything still had that pristine appearance, though sometimes I noticed the occasional long crack in the walls, showing that this place was not immune to time. After a few more turns, we came to an intersection. There stood a pentagonal chamber, its walls meeting at a point some 20 feet up, where a white crystal arrangement shimmered with an artificial light. Archways inset on each of the room's walls led into further hallways. Zirathra stopped, looking like she was about to say something, but instead raised her hand as if to silence me. I noticed that she was pointing a finger upward. There, in the ceiling, was a jagged crack in the plaster. I could hear a slight rumble, a rumble that was expanding and growing the more I stood there. In seconds, the entire chamber was shaking, bits of dust trickling from the ceiling. "Run," said Zirathra, turning away from me and towards one of the adjoining corridors. Sensing a surge of panic from her, I followed. From behind me I could hear a collapse, followed by a squirming, floppy noise. I followed her advice. Soon we were running side by side, hundreds of vines surging behind us like some wave of vegetation. Dashing through the corridor, we ducked down several side halls, my muscle legs working overtime to keep as far ahead of the vines as I could. Eventually, we reached a wide rectangular chamber with a curved cathedral ceiling and a single grand table set in its midst, surrounded by chairs. Zirathra stopped suddenly, gesturing for me to step aside. She turned around and faced the hall we had just ran down. There I could see that we had made good ground on the mass of moving vines, though I could still see them snaking down the hallway towards us. "What are you doing?" I asked of Zirathra, who was standing still, her hands clasped at her sternum, looking intently in the direction of the vines. She didn't respond, but I could sense a weird vibratory feeling all around. Above her head, glimmering particles began to spin, growing brighter by the second. Theatra. She continued to look down the corridor. The whole room started to shake. There was a cracking noise. The vines shambled forward. A chunk of material plummeted down, followed by another. Zirathra spread her arms wide and let loose a shout, a wave of Atra-infused air surging from her palms. The rest of the corridor collapsed onto the surging vines with a resounding crash. "It is done," she said, turning my way once the dust had settled, "at least for now." The remainder of her charged Atra faded from my sight. "Nice work there," I said, "but I'm sure that wasn't enough to stop them forever." "No. Those vines were designed to choke the life from an entire moon. Collapsing a hallway upon them will only stop them for a short while, but perhaps enough time to recover our strength, to find another way into the core." Zirathra spun around, once more gesturing for me to follow. Moments later, we stepped into a side chamber, a half-circle-shaped room lined with cushioned seats. At its center stood a metal cylinder, its base glowing from some inner power source. Zirathra sat down, letting loose an exhausted sigh. "I need but a few moments. My body is well, though my Atra is growing depleted." I nodded, plopping myself down on one of the seats nearby. Zirathra placed her hands on her lap and closed her eyes. Soon I could hear her breathing slowly, in her nose and out her mouth. I took a breather myself, leaning back into the seat's cushion and raising a hand behind my head to stretch. While I wasn't sure what my Atra levels were at, or how to recharge them, it had been a scraggin' long day, and I was sure I could use a moment. After I'd stretched out to my contentment and released a hearty yawn, I once more righted my body and took a peek around the room, since Z was still deep in her breathing. That cylinder looked like, something. Artwork, maybe? I reached out my foot and tapped its side. Suddenly, the cylinder emitted a set of glowing geometries hovering just above it, rotating slowly. The image of 3 ridged pillars, bound at their middle. More of Z's holograms, I guessed. Just looking at it triggered an associated mental message. Compassion, bravery, reason, the 3 pillars of Naiar understanding, the basis for all morality. Zirathra opened her eyes, nodding as she saw the holograms. Yes, this would be located here. This facility was once used to teach Naiar initiates, in a similar position to yours. These are the initial virtues that are taught, before any complex ethical systems are implemented. Oh yeah, the Naiar seem pretty big on this virtue stuff. Or at least they were back then. It was the same then as it is now. Essentially, you must learn to act with kindness and with boldness, but to temper all decisions with reason. Sounds kinda pointless to me, I said, giving the image of the 3 pillars another sideways glance. You do not agree? Oh, I agree well enough. Just not so sure we need a push in our faces like that. To me, being a good person is simple enough. You treat others decent, respect yourself, and don't scrag with anyone who doesn't deserve it. Your morality system seems rather subjective and open to potential abuse. It is completely reliant on the individual's whims and opinions. Plus, the Naiar recruit from a variety of cultures. We require a simple set of ethics to create a more uniform, smoothly running society. As well, we have discovered that developing certain moral characteristics allows one to channel the Atra more efficiently. That's interesting, I guess. Most initiates would be schooled extensively on the subject, but for now you'll have to make do with my abbreviated summary. The intricacies of the 3 pillars will have to wait, unfortunately. Because obviously I don't need it. I'm an absolute paragon of virtue, I said with a wink. Joke as you may, Keph. You are a far better person than you admit. Your world, savage as it is, has produced many a degenerate, though you are not among them. Whoa. Are you actually complimenting me? I responded. I thought you were supposed to be distant and elusive all the time. Maybe you do like me. I tossed on a big, silly grin and looked right at her. I was merely stating my observations. And no, I am only distant and elusive when it suits me, not all the time. Z matched my grin with her expected half-smile. I get the point. Virtues. Mastering the mind. Channeling more Atra. Yup. But there's something here that I'm not quite grasping. I cocked an eyebrow. And that is, you folks claim to be all about these virtues. Like compassion. But here we are constantly fighting our enemies. So what's up with the Veer, anyway? Why are you all at war? It is a most complicated topic. Our conflict is endured for what farm-worlders would regard as thousands of years. That's pretty scragged, I say. What would make you awake, higher beings want to fight all the time? I can sense your frustration, Keph. I admit, the topic of our constant conflict has given me just as much trouble as it has you. I often feel that we should just give up all this fighting and cooperate with one another. But it keeps going. Yes, it does. You see, the Veer were once part of the Naiar Harmonium, back when galactic society was still forming. They were never a separate species from us. The differences are, at their core, philosophical. In what way? Essentially, the Veer seek dominion. We seek harmony. Both of us require the Atra, the force behind all matter, emotion, and life. It is the Atra that allows us to transcend physical limitations, to overcome ordinary mortality, and to expand our awareness to higher and higher realms. We both need it, but digress into ways to acquire and use it. What's that supposed to mean? The Veer believe in extracting the Atra from life forms via harsher emotions, keeping their farm worlds in states of fear, anger, or heightened passion. and most often keeping the people mired in ignorance and survival. You have seen this directly on Arubis. They consume the Atra obtained this way, and in turn the Veer acquire those negative qualities for themselves, going more insane the more Atra they consume. So they're a bunch of crazies then. Over the millennia, they have justified their madness, declaring that the Naiar's rules and virtues are too restrictive, that we would impose a tyranny of order on the galaxy. They claim to value freedom, individuality, and liberty above all. Doesn't sound too bad. I too seek freedom, but true freedom is not to be found in giving into your baser impulses and abandoning decency. Our system of virtues is designed to help you master your mind, overcome your animal nature, and then rise above it. This is what the Veer do not grasp. They fall for the trap of hedonism, for obsession with the self, ultimately becoming narcissistic, disregarding life. You have personally seen the atrocities they commit upon your homeworld. All across the galaxy, the Veer have done the same and worse, all to acquire as much Atra as possible. Right. I've seen what they did to Arubis. Turned the planet into a wasteland, reduced our civilization to nothing, and started a bunch of shitty cults to themselves. If that's their way, scrag them. Scrag them indeed, she stated, that dirty old word sounding unnatural coming from her mouth. Zirathra once more glanced at the hologram representing the virtues. But seeing this hologram of the three pillars reminds me of a fact, that this temple was a place for new Naiar to train in the virtues. Per protocol, at the conclusion of their trials, initiates would link with the monadic core below. Okay. What's that mean? It means that if we find where they administered their trials, there will be another way down. Zirathra stood to her feet. My Atra levels are sufficient now. Follow me. I think I know where to look. Before us stretched a vaulted circular chamber, where titanic pillars rose up to a ceiling 50 feet above. In alcoves stood larger-than-life statues, sculpted of silver, gold, and copper, their figures highlighted in the beams that streamed from the ceiling. I got the chills as I stepped into the room, Zirathra strolling quietly beside me. The statues were immaculately sculpted, so detailed that they could have been the real thing. They depicted beings of diverse form, prime examples of humanoid beauty, but also entities of insectoid, avian, or reptilian caste. In some forms I didn't even have names for, many in the robes of scholars, but some in the armor of warriors, or nearly nude. This hall depicts the Naiar paragons, said Zirathra, stepping inside, or at least those regarded as such when this facility was functional. They were the ones the new initiates were supposed to emulate the most, those individuals chosen as the best representatives of Naiar virtue and behavior. We stopped to look them over. My first instinct was to be bored. What did I care about some dusty old statues of people long gone? But maybe I did care. Just looking at them, I could feel the history, the nobility radiating. There was an old part of me that wanted to dismiss it all as stupid, or a load of pretentious nonsense that no self-respecting wasteland scrapper would get involved with. That part of me wasn't real, just a ghost of the past. As I looked over these antiquated masters, felt a pull, a mystery behind their serene gazes, carrying the weight of a history so old it was inconceivable. The prior me would have never admitted it. This was actually kind of interesting. I began examining the statues, starting with the one on my right. Merrant the Warcaster, said a thought coming from a depiction of a limber, robe-clad lizard being with a spiked headdress. It was they who first mastered the virtues and saw the Atra. Yim Nazig of the Void, a statue of a tiny elfin figure with a lone horn protruding from its forehead, who discovered their true nature after 2 millennia of seclusion, alone in deep space. Calibrus the Selfless, he who fought back an entire Veer fleet to defend the galactic core. He suffers still as their captive. The statue was of a burly fellow whose features I would describe as bird-like, with a hooked beak and intense eyes beneath crested plumage, wearing what looked like military officer's garb. I noticed that Zirathra's gaze lingered a bit longer on one of the statues. She had that distant look in her eyes that suggested she was in deep thought, though as usual she was doing a fine job of hiding it. Too bad I didn't know how to establish a mind link with her on my own. Looking at said statue myself, I beheld a golden, youthful visage, warmth in the smile, yet an unreachable detachment in those distant, dreamy eyes. His head was cleanly hairless, a violet-hued third eye in the center of his forehead. The statue's rune-lined robes stood open at the chest, revealing a well-muscled form, while his 4 chiseled arms held twin scepters above his head. Below the chest, his lower body grew serpentine, ending in a coiled tail which he rested upon. Aychuck, Archon of the 12th Throne. A voice broadcast this to my mind while displaying a matching script over the statue's head. A powerful voice among the Naiar, he leads the grand effort of transcendence, seeking the limits of the universe and the truth of what lies beyond it. He serves as a prime example of all Naiar virtues, particularly those of detachment and resolve. So, what? Did you know this guy or something? I asked of Zirathra. Aychuck was the one who trained me in the Naiar ways after I had completed my own ascension. He was a great philosopher among us, a being who was always seeking the truth. Lord Aychuck was wise, benevolent, truly soulful one. There was a faint glimmer in her eyes. What happened to him? I asked. He was an elder among us, one who had held thousands of names and walked uncounted paths. Aychuck grew more distant as the centuries passed, and the stars circled the galaxy's center. In his quest for the truth, he had amassed so much atra that it changed him. His body shifted into a more sublime form, along with his mind, giving him a deep understanding of reality, but also draining away his love of simple things. In the end, all he desired was his great quest, to transcend the universe, to find the one true creator. A curious vibration ran down my back. Was he, successful? I cannot say. Long ages ago, he departed for his final quest, to seek the sentient core of an ancient star. As in, inside of an actual physical star. Aren't those, pretty hot? Indeed. For most beings, Naiar, Vayar, or otherwise, to enter the middle of a star would sear the body and mind both, bringing virtual annihilation. Master Aychuck believed himself of sufficiently advanced vibration to survive such a journey. The atra, in its purest form, may be capable of such feats, but perhaps he was wrong. In the millennia since he vanished, there's been no word of him. She let out a sigh. You loved him, didn't you? This time I could see that her big, beautiful eyes were getting watery. She looked down as she spoke, breaking our gaze. Love. Such a concept is different among us. We are taught to rise above our emotions, to break away from attachments and feelings. In order to truly direct the atra, we must treat our emotions as tools, not be subject to them. The Naiar do not have families like people on farm worlds do. Freed from the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, we no longer cling to one another like possessions, or seek to own others as spouses. That sounds kinda cold. Not very fun, I said. Her face softened. Zirathra looked back up at me, and our eyes met once more. But we are not automatons. We are allowed to feel our passions, and we are free to express them as we see fit, so long as none are harmed. Bonds of both mutual pleasure and a deeper tenderness are indeed formed. I formed such a bond with Aychuck, she continued, a union that persisted through many of your generations. For a time our minds and our hearts were united, yet as the centuries rolled on, he grew ever distant, until his sole care was for his quest, and then he disappeared, and has not been seen to this day. I'm sorry, I said, taking a step towards her. Are you all right? Once more her expression hardened, returning to the usual unreadable serenity. I have cleansed myself of all attachment to him. I am master of my own emotions. Do not be concerned for me. And with those words, Zirathra turned away from me and began walking down one of the corridors. Though we were not mind-linked, I could sense the falseness of her words, along with an intense, vast loneliness. I kinda wanted to hold her then, to embrace her in my arms and break that loneliness. But I knew this wasn't the time or the place for that. I began turning to follow her, but took one last peek back at the golden statue. A part of me wished to be him, to hold all that wisdom and reverence, to be worthy of someone like her. At the same time, I could have punched that yug in the mouth had he been there. But Ayos Garadel was long gone. We continued on our way, wordlessly. At the hall's terminus was an oval-shaped archway, decorated with a series of looping patterns. It looked only decorative, with no room beyond. But as we approached, a curtain of liquid metal flashed into existence within that archway, waving and rippling like water. Initiate Level 1 Virtue Testing, said a mental pattern that emerged from the archway. With the central lift blocked, this may be our only way through. The initiates would have been sent directly to the core after passing their trials. I am not exactly sure what will lie beyond, but it will likely be a simulated environment designed to test you in one of the 3 primary virtues. Virtue testing. Ugh, reminds me of that dumb tower. Both you folks and the Vare are super fond of your little trials. Since ancient times, hands-on trials have proven to be far more effective than mere intellectual knowledge. Typically, initiates would receive numerous lessons on philosophy before undergoing such a trial, but I suspect you will have little issue with it. Most Naiar initiates hail from more peaceful worlds than your own, and have only seen a fraction of the struggles you have. The trials are designed for them to use their knowledge in action. I gulped, looking at the rippling liquid curtain of the archway. I felt in no way ready for this, despite her words. Just remember, the test will be on one of the 3 pillars: compassion, bravery, or reason. These are all qualities you possess, else I would not even be working with you. She wore a full smile on her tiny lips. I was sure it was forced, but there was some warmth in her eyes nonetheless. I nodded. I will see you on the other side, said Z, and stepped through, vanishing from sight. I gave the rippling portal one more look over. Scrag it, I thought. Z was right. I had handled a whole buttload of trials in that damn tower. No way this was going to be any worse. I stepped through. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Space God Memoirs. Space God is written, performed, and produced by A.M. Arctos. Original musical score by Alpha Colors. Various sound effects created by Industrial Strength Records Incorporated. Please support this podcast by following, rating, and sharing on your favorite social media site. For further info on Space God, its creator, and various other opinions, musings, and thoughts, go to www.spacegodmemoirs.com or follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. If you enjoyed the Space God Memoirs, please consider supporting us by becoming a patron. Check out the Patreon link in our description to learn more.